The airport was packed with ordinary travelers going about their day. Then, a uniformed colonel approached the counter with a mission no soldier ever once. What the airline did next sparked a firestorm that reached the Pentagon in under an hour. Stay with me, because what you are about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about how we treat our heroes. The terminal hummed with the usual chaos. Families dragged rolling suitcases across scuffed tile floors. Business travelers hunched over laptops in uncomfortable chairs. Kids darted between their exhausted parents, too excited about vacation to walk in straight lines. Gate announcements echoed through the space, barely audible over the din of 1,000 conversations happening at once. Then the automatic doors slid open, and Colonel David Carter stepped inside. His polished dress shoes clicked against the floor with military precision. The uniform alone would have drawn attention, the pressed fabric, the sharp creases, the ribbons and medals that told stories most people would never hear. But it wasn't the uniform that weighed on him that morning. It was the knowledge of what waited on the tarmac, a casket, draped in the American flag. Private First Class Jason Reynolds, 21 years old. A life cut short before it really began. Carter had done this before, too many times if he was being honest. Each time felt like carrying a piece of his own soul to its final resting place. But that was the job. That was the promise made to every soldier who put on the uniform. No one gets left behind, ever. He adjusted his hat, took a measured breath, and walked toward the airline counter. He carried his military orders and identification in one hand. Everything was in order. Everything was documented. Everything should have been routine. The woman behind the counter was young, maybe mid-20s. She had that practiced customer service smile, the one that never quite reaches the eyes. She glanced up as Carter approached, her fingers already moving across the keyboard before he even said a word. Then she saw the uniform. The smile flickered, just for a second. She typed something into her computer. Her expression changed. It was subtle, the kind of shift most people might miss. But Carter had spent decades reading people in high-stakes situations. He saw it, the hesitation, the uncertainty. She looked up again, and this time the smile was gone. "Sir," she said, her voice tight and controlled. "Can I see that again?" Carter handed over the papers without a word. He watched her closely. The way her eyes darted to the documents, then to her computer screen, then over her shoulder to a coworker standing near the back. The way she shifted her weight, like she was suddenly uncomfortable in her own skin. Something was wrong. She turned, whispering something to another agent. The second agent glanced over, his face carefully neutral. They exchanged words Carter couldn't hear. The woman came back to the counter, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed. Professional. Distant. The kind of tone people use when they're following a script they don't believe in. "I am sorry, sir, but there seems to be an issue with your ticket. We can't allow you to board at this time." Carter felt his jaw tighten, but his voice remained steady. Years of military discipline had taught him how to control his reactions, even when every instinct told him to push back. "I am escorting the remains of a fallen soldier," he said evenly, tapping the paperwork on the counter. "Everything is in order." The agent didn't meet his eyes. "I understand, sir, but there is a security protocol in place. We can't override it." Security protocol. Carter had heard that phrase before, usually from people who were hiding something. "What policy?" he asked, keeping his voice level. The agent forced another weak smile. "It's just policy, sir." Policy. That word again. Carter didn't move, didn't step aside, didn't give an inch. Behind him, he could feel the line growing restless, people shifting, murmuring, eyes turning toward him. A decorated officer in full military dress uniform being denied his flight. It wasn't something you saw every day. "Ma'am," Carter said, his voice still controlled, "I need to understand exactly what the issue is. This is a military assignment, not a personal trip. My documentation is valid." The agent's eyes darted away again. More whispers, more uncomfortable glances. Then a supervisor emerged from the back, a man in his mid-50s with a tired expression and a name tag that hung slightly crooked on his shirt. He adjusted it as he approached, then folded his arms across his chest. "Sir, I apologize for the inconvenience," he began, his voice carrying that professional tone people use when they want you to stop asking questions. "We have certain policies in place, and unfortunately we can't override them at this time." There it was again. Policies. Carter inhaled slowly through his nose. "I've flown with military escorts before," he said, keeping his frustration buried under layers of training. "I know the procedure. I know there is no policy stopping me from boarding. So let's be honest. What's the real reason I am being denied?" The supervisor cleared his throat. "It's just an extra security measure," he said. "Nothing personal, sir. Nothing personal." Carter's hands tightened into fists at his sides, but he kept them there, controlled. He'd been in too many rooms where people hid behind vague explanations. They were testing him, waiting for him to lose his temper, to give them a reason to call security and make this his fault. He wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. The people in line were watching now. A woman in a red blazer leaned toward her husband, whispering. A young man holding his boarding pass frowned, looking between Carter and the airline employees like he was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't make sense. Then a voice cut through the tension. "Sir," the voice said, firm and steady. "Do you have an issue with his military clearance?" Carter turned his head slightly. A few spots behind him in line stood an older man, maybe mid-60s, with a weathered face and a USMC hat pulled low over his brow. A Marine, a veteran. Someone who understood what was really happening here. The supervisor looked uncomfortable. "No, sir," he said quickly. "This isn't about clearance. We just have to follow standard protocol." The Marine let out a sharp breath, the kind of sound that carried decades of frustration. "Yeah," he said, his voice cutting through the terminal noise. "I've been through security 1,000 times, and I've never seen protocol stop a soldier from escorting one of our own home." "So what is it?" More murmurs spread through the line. People started pulling out their phones. Some pretended to check messages, but Carter could see the camera lenses pointed in his direction. The shift in the air was immediate and palpable. The staff behind the counter could feel it too. The agent who had originally denied Carter stole a glance at her supervisor, her expression uncertain now, like she was realizing this wasn't going to blow over quietly. The supervisor sighed, rubbing a hand over his temple. He looked at Carter again, and something in his eyes suggested he knew this moment was bigger than a simple boarding dispute. "Let me check something," he muttered, before walking off toward the back offices. The agent at the counter kept her gaze down, suddenly very interested in her computer screen. Carter didn't move. He stood tall, shoulders squared, staring straight ahead. He wasn't going anywhere. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about every soldier who had ever been treated as less than. Every family that had ever waited for their loved one to come home. Every promise made and broken. The terminal wasn't just background noise anymore. It was focused, charged. People in line were no longer waiting passively for their flights. They were watching, recording, bearing witness. The Marine who had spoken up earlier wasn't the only one who looked irritated now. A middle-aged woman in a denim jacket clutched her purse and shook her head. "This isn't right," she muttered to her husband, loud enough for others to hear. "He's in uniform." A younger man in a hoodie pulled out his phone and started typing, his fingers moving fast across the screen. More phones came out. More cameras. More eyes. Carter kept his expression unreadable, but inside, he was cataloging every detail. The supervisor still hadn't returned, which meant one of two things. Either he was scrambling for an excuse, or he was waiting for this to die down. Neither was going to happen. Then a voice came from behind him. "Excuse me, sir." Carter turned his head slightly. A young woman, no older than 25, stood a few feet away with her phone in hand. Her eyes were uncertain but determined, like she was stepping into something bigger than herself, but knew it was the right thing to do. "Don't mean to intrude," she said carefully, "but I just want to make sure I understand. They're not letting you board?" Her voice wasn't loud, but the way she said it, careful and deliberate, made people nearby pay even more attention. Carter exhaled, glancing at the agent behind the counter who was now frozen in place. "That's correct," he said. The young woman blinked, as if she expected to hear a different answer. She hesitated for just a second, then nodded once and turned her phone screen toward him. "I am live right now," she said quietly. "People need to see this." And just like that, the floodgates opened. Another man held up his phone. "This is wrong," he said, shaking his head. "This man is literally escorting a fallen soldier." A woman further back in line raised her voice. "Hey, excuse me," she called out, waving her hand toward the counter. "Can someone explain why he's being denied?" A few people shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether they should get involved. But the energy in the room had changed. What started as quiet murmurs had grown into something bigger, something the airline staff could no longer ignore. The agent behind the counter looked like she wanted to disappear. Her hands were frozen over the keyboard, eyes flickering to the camera lenses pointed in her direction. The weight of public scrutiny was settling in, and it was crushing. Then the Marine from earlier took a step forward. He was done playing nice. "I've seen a lot of things in my time," he said, his voice steady but firm. "But I never thought I'd see the day when an American soldier, especially one escorting the remains of a brother in arms, was treated like this." The terminal had gone eerily quiet. Even the usual airport announcements over the speakers seemed distant and muted. The only sound was the soft beeping of phones recording, capturing every second of what was unfolding. The Marine squared his shoulders and looked directly at the airline staff. "This is a disgrace," he said. The agent swallowed hard. Her fingers trembled as she clicked at her keyboard again. The supervisor was still nowhere to be seen. Passengers whispered to each other. A baby fussed in its stroller, but the mother, instead of soothing the child, was staring at her phone, reading something with a look of disgust on her face. Then, somewhere in the back of the line, a man muttered just loud enough to be heard, "It's already trending." Carter didn't move. He didn't need to. The world was watching now, and the world wasn't going to look away. The tension in the terminal was thick enough to cut. The supervisor was still gone. The airline staff stood in awkward silence, trapped between their orders and the court of public opinion that was forming in real time around them. Phones were out everywhere now, recording, tweeting, streaming. Then, like a spark hitting dry grass, it spread. The young man in the hoodie, still glued to his phone, let out a low whistle. "Damn," he said. "This is everywhere now." Carter didn't react. He knew better than to celebrate too soon, but from the way the agent behind the counter stiffened, he could tell she knew it too. The woman in the denim jacket checked her phone and gasped. "Oh my God," she whispered to her husband. "It's already on Facebook." The older Marine grunted, pulling out his own phone. They don't even know what kind of storm they just started. Then, as if on cue, the airport's loudspeaker crackled to life. "Attention passengers," the voice announced. "Due to unforeseen circumstances, Flight 237 to Phoenix will be delayed. We apologize for any inconvenience." A few groans rippled through the crowd, but most people weren't even paying attention. Their focus was here, on the uniformed soldier being refused his flight while carrying out his duty. A minute later, a young woman near the windows gasped. "He's on Twitter," she said, turning her screen toward the crowd. People leaned in. A tweet written in bold capital letters. "They just denied a black U.S. Army colonel his flight while escorting a fallen soldier's remains. This is how we treat our heroes. Hashtag let him fly." Underneath it, the numbers were climbing. Retweets, comments, likes. It was catching fire. Then another tweet popped up, this one from a veteran advocacy group. "We are aware of the disgraceful incident happening at this airport. Our soldiers deserve better. Expect action." The crowd murmured, the realization sinking in. The airline had officially lost control of the narrative. The agent behind the counter, still frozen in place, let out a shaky breath. She turned and hurried toward the back, disappearing behind a frosted glass door. She wasn't coming back with an answer. She was coming back with damage control. Carter adjusted his hat. He'd been in situations like this before, not at an airport, not like this, but in places where powerful people suddenly realized they'd made the wrong enemy. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't gloating, because at the end of the day, this wasn't about him. It was about Private First Class Jason Reynolds, the young man waiting to go home, and right now, that mission was still incomplete. The crowd wasn't just watching anymore, they were waiting. The terminal felt different now, charged with expectation. Then the supervisor finally returned, but he wasn't alone. A second man walked beside him, this one in a sleek navy suit with an airline ID clipped neatly to his pocket. His walk was brisk, controlled, like someone used to putting out fires. He stopped just short of the counter, scanning the scene. His eyes darted between Carter, the Marine, and the rows of phones still recording. He cleared his throat. "Colonel," he began, his voice professional and measured. "I apologize for the miscommunication. There seems to have been an error with our system, but we're working to get you on your flight as soon as possible." Miscommunication. Carter had been in the military long enough to know what that word really meant. It meant we got caught. It meant fix this before it costs us too much. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he let the moment hang, watching the airline representative shift slightly under the weight of the silence. "I see," Carter finally said, his voice measured. "An error, you said." "Yes, sir," the rep replied quickly. "A regrettable mistake. We assure you it was not intentional." A few people in the crowd scoffed. The Marine shook his head. The airline rep adjusted his tie, clearly uncomfortable. "We'd like to personally escort you to the gate now, Colonel. First-class accommodations, of course. First class." As if that was the point. Carter looked past the man toward the counter, where the agent still stood, looking anywhere but at him. The same agent who had smiled at him stiffly when she denied his flight. The same one who had never bothered to check before saying no. Carter exhaled slowly. "I appreciate the urgency," he said, "but I need to clarify something." The rep nodded quickly. "Of course." Carter's voice remained even. "If no one recorded this, If no one spoke up, would I still be standing here? A beat of silence. The rep swallowed. Sir, You don't need to answer, Carter interrupted. He already knew. Another moment of silence, then a woman in the crowd murmured, He's right. The rep tried to smooth over the tension again. Sir, we sincerely apologize. We both know this isn't about an apology, Carter said. It's about accountability. The crowd murmured in agreement. People weren't just angry anymore. They were disappointed. The rep knew he was losing control. He straightened his posture, adopting a more authoritative stance. Colonel, let's get you on your flight now. But before Carter could respond, a new voice cut in. Sir, a younger man in an airport security uniform had appeared at the side of the counter. He held out a phone toward the airline rep, his expression tight. I think you should see this. The rep frowned, taking the phone. He scrolled. His face paled. The Marine crossed his arms. What, something wrong? The rep didn't answer, but Carter already knew. The backlash had officially exploded beyond the airport. A major news outlet had picked up the story. The headline was blunt. U.S. Army colonel denied flight while escorting fallen soldier. Airline scrambles for answers. Below it, a video clip played, footage from the terminal. The rep handed the phone back, inhaled sharply, and turned to Carter. We deeply regret this situation, he said, his voice thinner now, forced. We'd like to issue a public statement clarifying. Carter cut him off. The public already knows the truth. Silence. The rep pressed his lips together. Carter looked at the crowd, at the phones still recording. He turned back to the rep. I don't need first class, he said. I don't need special treatment. I need respect. And so does the soldier I am escorting. Another murmur ran through the crowd. The rep gave a stiff nod, as if that was all he could do now. Understood, sir. The Marine let out a small, approving grunt. Carter adjusted his hat. Now let's finish this mission. But the consequences for the airline were just beginning. They had lost control of the situation. The story was out, spreading faster than they could contain it. The terminal felt more like a press conference now. Phones still recording. Passengers still watching. Then something unexpected happened. A man in a dark blue suit with the unmistakable posture of someone with real authority walked into the scene. He wasn't from the airline. He wasn't airport security. He was military. The room shifted. People moved aside instinctively as the man approached. His ID badge flashed briefly as he stepped up to Carter and extended his hand. Colonel, he said firmly. I am Major Thomas Beckett, Department of the Army. We've been informed of the situation. Carter shook his hand, his grip strong. He didn't need to ask how the major got here so quickly. The military doesn't play when it comes to its own. Beckett turned to the airline rep, his voice crisp. We are handling this now. Colonel Carter and the remains of Private First Class Reynolds will not be flying commercial. The rep blinked. Sir, you were just about to cover your tracks, Beckett interrupted, his tone polite but carrying weight. He glanced at Carter. Sir, the Pentagon has arranged for a private military. People exchanged glances. The U.S. military had stepped in. Carter exhaled, not out of relief. He didn't need saving, but because this mission was finally back on course. He gave a small nod. Understood, Major. Beckett's gaze flicked toward the airline rep one last time. This will be addressed, he said. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Carter turned back to the Marine, who had been watching the entire exchange with satisfaction. Appreciate you, brother, Carter said. The Marine tipped his head. We look out for our own. Carter gave the room one last glance. The people who had spoken up, who had refused to let this slide, who had made sure this story was heard. He adjusted his uniform, squared his shoulders, and walked out. Not toward the gate, but toward something bigger. But for the airline, the fallout was just getting started. They thought the situation would fade. A few apologies, a press release, maybe a statement from their CEO, damage control, standard procedure. But the public wasn't letting this go. News networks picked it up. Veterans organizations released statements condemning the airline's actions. Politicians weighed in, demanding accountability. Then came the financial hit. By the end of the week, the airline's stock had dropped. A trending hashtag calling for a boycott gained traction. Customers flooded their social media with demands for answers. And then the final blow. A lawsuit. A coalition of military advocacy groups filed a formal complaint against the airline for discrimination and failure to uphold service member protections. Under pressure, the airline's CEO made a public appearance. He called it a regrettable misunderstanding and announced that the employees involved had been placed on administrative leave. Too little. Too late. Meanwhile, Colonel Carter continued his mission. He escorted Private First Class Jason Reynolds home, standing by as the young soldier's family received him for the last time. He didn't need the headlines. He didn't need the attention. He needed respect. And that was the real fight. Respect shouldn't be conditional. It shouldn't require a viral video or public outrage. It should be the standard. The people at that airport, the Marine, the passengers who spoke up, the ones who refused to stay silent, they proved something important. When people stand together, injustice has nowhere to hide. If you believe in accountability, if you believe in honoring those who serve, let your voice be heard. Because silence lets things like this happen again. And next time, it might not go viral.